When Linda Morrison torched my cornfield, she walked straight into the trap I'd been setting for 6 weeks. The smell of burning corn filled the night air. 3 acres. My twin daughter's college tuition money turning to ash right before my eyes. Linda stood by the fence line with that smug smile, still clutching the gas can like she'd just finished her masterpiece. Farming is so outdated, she giggled into her phone, live streaming to her Facebook friends. This neighborhood deserves something better. Then the sirens started wailing, getting closer, getting louder. Linda's smile vanished when she realized those fire trucks weren't heading somewhere else. Because what this psycho didn't know, I'd been expecting her to pull exactly this stunt. What would you do if your HOA neighbor burned down your kid's future for Facebook likes? Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, because I guarantee some of you are dealing with suburban tyrants just like this right now. If you've ever fantasized about serving ice-cold justice to someone who wronged you, hit that like button, smash that subscribe, and get ready. Because what you're about to hear is one of the most satisfying revenge stories I've ever covered. This is about a family farmer who faced down a corrupt real estate agent, a crooked development company, and an entire network of paid criminals. And won so decisively that it changed state law. Let's get into it. Let me back up and tell you how this whole nightmare started. My name is David Brennan, and I'm a third-generation corn farmer on 8 acres in rural Ohio. My grandfather bought this land back in 1953 for $300 and a handshake. Back then, it was nothing but corn fields as far as you could see. Golden waves stretching to the horizon, the kind of landscape that makes you understand why they call it America's heartland. Fast forward 70 years, and I'm surrounded by McMansions with names like Heritage Meadows Estates. The irony? Not a single meadow left. And the only heritage around here is my family's farm that these people treat like dog crap on their designer shoes. My wife Rachel teaches 3rd grade. Our twin daughters, Olivia and Sophia, are both 18 and college-bound. Olivia wants to be a veterinarian. Sophia's going for engineering. College costs $30,000 each. You know what pays for that? My corn harvest. Every damn kernel. The sweet smell of corn tassels in late summer used to be my favorite thing. That green, earthy scent that means everything's growing the way it should. Now it just reminds me of everything I almost lost to one psychotic real estate agent. Enter Linda Morrison, 48 years old, HOA president and part-time house flipper. She moved into the biggest McMansion 3 years ago. Vinyl siding, fake shutters, garage bigger than my barn. Her backyard butts right up against my property line, separated by my grandfather's weathered oak fence that's been standing there since Eisenhower was president. Last spring, she shows up at my door with a clipboard and that dead-eyed realtor smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Hi, neighbor. We've had complaints about your farm equipment being visible from the street. I looked at my 1960 John Deere sitting exactly where it belonged. Same spot it's been for 6 decades. Lady, that tractor's been there longer than your whole subdivision. The smile turned predatory, like a shark that just smelled blood. Several residents say it's killing property values. My clients are concerned about the rural aesthetic. Here's the kicker. My farm predates their HOA by 40 years. I'm not even in their jurisdiction. But try explaining that to someone whose biggest crisis is mismatched mailboxes. This is a working farm, I said, keeping my voice level. The equipment stays. Mr. Brennan. Her voice went ice cold. Being a good neighbor means considering how your choices affect others. I'd hate for this to become unpleasant. That's when my rooster Henry decided to crow right on cue. The sound of gravel crunching under her heels as she stormed off should have been my first warning. But the real gut punch came 2 days later. I'm out checking irrigation lines when I hear voices by the fence. Linda's there with some slick guy in a $1,000 suit, pointing at my cornfield like she's already planning the street names. 8 acres, perfect for luxury townhomes, she's saying, her voice carrying across the still morning air. The farming situation is temporary. The suit nods, taking notes on some expensive-looking tablet. Timeline for vacant possession? 6 months. Max. These old farmers always cave when you apply the right pressure. My blood turned to ice water. This wasn't about property values or community standards. This was about commission checks and development deals. She was already selling my land. Land that wasn't even for sale. I ducked behind my grandfather's old tool shed, heart pounding like I was back in Afghanistan. The rough bark of that century-old oak tree felt solid under my palm. But everything else suddenly felt fragile. That night, I called Nathan Cooper, agricultural lawyer and old army buddy. Nathan, hypothetically, what happens if someone tries to harass a farmer off his land for development? Nothing hypothetical about it, David. Happens all the time. Document everything. And David, watch your six. As I hung up, Rachel came out onto the porch with 2 beers. Everything okay? I looked across my land. Cornstalks rustling in the evening breeze. Same sound my grandfather heard every summer for 50 years. Honey, I think we're about to find out just how far people will go for money. The next morning, I found my irrigation hose had been slashed in 3 places. Game on, Linda. 3 slashed irrigation hoses might not sound like much, but when you're feeding 30,000 corn plants during the hottest week of July, it's basically economic warfare. I spent my mornings splicing rubber in 100-degree heat, the metallic taste of anger coating my tongue like copper. I didn't have to wait long for round 2. Tuesday afternoon, I'm checking corn stalks when this white county truck rumbles up my gravel drive. Fire Marshal Greg Patterson steps out looking apologetic as hell, clipboard in hand like he's about to ruin my day. David, sorry to bother you, but I got a complaint about illegal agricultural burning on your property. Illegal burning? I wiped sweat off my forehead with a dirty sleeve. Greg, you know I haven't burned anything since spring cleanup, and that was with proper permits. He shrugged, clearly not buying it either. Someone filed a formal complaint. Says you've been conducting unauthorized brush burning during drought conditions. Even provided photos. My stomach dropped to my boots. Photos of what? Greg handed me a manila folder that felt like a loaded gun. Inside were pictures of smoke rising from what looked like my back 40, except that smoke was from Tom Henderson's controlled burn 3 miles away, shot from an angle that made it look like my property was on fire. This is complete, Greg. That's not even my land in the background. I know, David, but rules are rules. I gotta investigate every complaint. His voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd seen too many neighbor wars. Mind if we take a look around? 20 minutes later, Greg confirmed what we both knew. My fire safety protocols were military-grade perfect. Burn permits current. Fire breaks maintained. Water sources marked. He even complimented my grandfather's old stone fire ring that I still used for brush disposal. Whoever filed this either doesn't know farming, or they're setting you up for something, Greg said, climbing back in his truck. Watch your six, David. That evening, I installed my first security camera. Nothing fancy, just a trail cam pointed at the equipment shed. The soft click of the mounting bracket reminded me of setting up perimeter security overseas. Different enemy. Same tactics. Wednesday morning brought the diesel message. The acrid smell hit me before I even saw the puddle around my fuel tank. Someone had dumped about a gallon of it in the sandy soil. Not enough to damage anything. Just enough to let me know they could get close whenever they wanted. I started researching Linda's business practices that afternoon. The county assessor's website revealed what I suspected. She'd been promising buyers that agricultural zoning changes are anticipated, except no such changes were even being discussed. In Ohio, that kind of misrepresentation can cost you your real estate license. Permanently. Thursday brought the game changer I should have seen coming. I'm replacing fence boards when Walter Green shuffles over, glancing around like he's about to confess to murder. Walter, 75, retired postal worker, had lived here since before Linda's McMansion invasion. David, we need to talk. His voice barely carried over the evening breeze rustling through corn leaves. What's up, Walter? That Morrison woman came by yesterday asking about your schedule. When you'd be away from the property. His weathered hands gripped the fence rail so tight his knuckles went white. When I didn't bite, she offered me $500 cash for information about your safety violations. Safety violations I don't have. That's when she suggested I might start noticing some. Walter's voice shook with disgust. My late wife Susan used to love watching your grandfather work this land. Linda's trying to destroy something beautiful for commission money. That's when Walter became my inside man. Turned out Linda had visited half the neighborhood with similar offers. Most told her to take a hike, but a couple seemed interested in easy cash. By Friday, I had a war chest of evidence. Photos of the diesel vandalism, documentation of the false fire report, screenshots of Linda's fraudulent property listings, witness statements about attempted bribery. But my real counterpunch came from those misleading real estate listings still active on her website. I called the Ohio Division of Real Estate, armed with screenshots of every promise she couldn't deliver. Ma'am, I'd like to file a complaint about fraudulent claims regarding agricultural zoning. The investigator's interest was immediate and intense. Apparently, Linda wasn't the first agent they tracked for this particular scam. That weekend, I installed more cameras and researched agricultural protection laws until my eyes burned from screen glare. Walter stopped by Sunday with coffee and reconnaissance. Linda's having some kind of war council tonight. 4 cars showed up around 7. The sound of multiple engines in her driveway carried across the still evening air. Through my kitchen window, I watched shadows moving behind her curtains. Let the games begin, Linda. Your move. Monday morning brought Linda's next chess move, and it was uglier than I expected. She'd formed a neighborhood safety committee. Basically a gang of bored suburbanites with clipboards and serious grudges against anything that didn't come from Home Depot. First up was Jennifer Williams, rolling up in a spotless white Lexus that probably cost more than my annual seed budget. She parked right at my property line and started photographing my barn like she was documenting war crimes. "Morning, Jennifer," I called out, walking over with my coffee. The bitter taste of day-old grounds matched my mood perfectly. She jumped like I'd caught her stealing chickens. "Oh, David, I'm just documenting some safety concerns." Safety concerns? I looked at my perfectly maintained equipment shed. About what exactly? Well, she fumbled with her phone, clearly reading from a script. The proximity of your fuel storage to residential property, and the vermin attraction from your composting practices. I wanted to laugh, but the implications weren't funny. My fuel tank sat farther from her house than her own barbecue grill. My compost pile met every agricultural regulation in the book. "Jennifer, you've lived here, 6 months? My family's been following safety codes since before your subdivision existed." The guilty flush creeping up her neck told me everything. Linda had fed her lines, and she was just a desperate actress trying to earn her $50. Over the next week, committee members took shifts harassing me. Tuesday brought Martin Cruz documenting dust concerns, while my corn swayed silently in the breeze. Wednesday was Susan Walsh complaining about my rooster's morning calls. The same rooster that had been crowing here for 3 years before she moved in. By Friday, they were demanding I install expensive privacy fencing to hide my unsightly agricultural operations. That's when Walter shuffled over with intelligence that would change everything. "David, we need to talk." His voice barely carried over the rustling corn leaves. "Found out something about your committee friends." I set down my hammer. "I'm listening." Walter pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, his weathered hands shaking slightly. "Did some digging on those people. Martin Cruz? He's facing an insurance fraud lawsuit, allegedly staged property damage for payouts. Susan Walsh just lost her real estate license for forging inspection documents." My stomach dropped like a stone. Linda's recruiting criminals. Gets worse. Walter stepped closer, lowering his voice to barely a whisper. "Overheard her offering them $50 per documented violation they can report. She's buying false testimony." Now I understood the game. This wasn't neighborhood concern. It was organized fraud designed to build a legal case that would force me off my land. My daughter's college money. My grandfather's legacy. Everything I'd worked for, under assault by paid liars. Linda's next move hit me where it hurt most. During peak irrigation season, when my corn needed every drop to survive the August inferno, I was out checking sprinkler heads at dawn when Walter's panicked voice cut through the morning air. "David!" County truck just pulled into Linda's driveway. The crunch of dried corn husks under my boots sounded like breaking bones as I jogged toward the fence. My gut told me this wasn't a social call. 20 minutes later, Water Inspector Carol Harris knocked on my door, holding a death warrant disguised as official paperwork. "Sorry, David. Got complaints about excessive water usage depleting the neighborhood supply. Your irrigation system needs immediate shutdown pending investigation." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the cease and desist order, watching my daughter's college dreams evaporate in real time. "Carol, my well's been here since 1953. It's never affected anyone's water. I know this stinks, but look at these usage numbers." She handed me charts showing water consumption 3 times normal agricultural levels. "According to this data, you're using enough water for a golf course." The numbers were pure fantasy. My grandfather's old well couldn't pump that volume if it ran 24/7. But someone had created official-looking documents that would fool a rushed inspection. Who filed the complaint? Anonymous tip. But, David. Carol glanced around nervously, lowering her voice. "This feels orchestrated. Get your own usage test done. Fast. If these numbers are fabricated, someone's using county resources for a personal vendetta." As her truck disappeared down my gravel drive, I felt the metallic taste of real fear. Without irrigation, my corn would die within a week. 30,000 plants. $60,000 in lost revenue. Olivia and Sophia's tuition money. Gone. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A 20-foot strip of corn along my eastern property line had turned brown overnight. Not drought-stressed yellow, but chemically burned brown. The sickly sweet smell of herbicide hung in the still air like poison gas. Someone had dumped industrial-strength weed killer on my crops. My trail camera. I'd positioned one to cover this exact section after last week's vandalism. Back at the house, my hands shook as I pulled up the footage. Fast-forwarding through hours of darkness until 2:47 a.m., when she appeared like a suburban ghost. Linda Morrison, creeping along my fence line with a large spray bottle, methodically poisoning my corn plants. The infrared camera caught everything. Her face, the herbicide container, even her license plate when she loaded the empty bottle into her Mercedes. She documented her own felony in crystal-clear detail. 3 hours later, I was at Tractor Supply talking to my buddy Tom. Their parking lot security camera had captured Linda purchasing 2 gallons of Roundup concentrate the previous evening. Cash transaction, but her face was unmistakable under the sodium lights. I had her cold on agricultural vandalism, criminal trespassing, and crop destruction. In Ohio, destroying someone's crops is a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. But something told me this was just the opening salvo. That evening, Walter shuffled over with intelligence that explained Linda's desperation. "She's in deep trouble," he whispered, glancing around like enemy agents might be listening. "Overheard her screaming at someone on the phone about development timelines. Apparently her broker contract has penalty clauses." "What kind of penalties?" $50,000 forfeiture if the land isn't available by October 1st. Plus, she loses the commission. Walter's weathered face looked haunted. "David, she's borrowed against that expected money. If this deal collapses, she faces bankruptcy." The pieces clicked into place like rifle rounds chambering. Linda wasn't just harassing me. She was fighting for her financial survival. Public records showed her development deal with Midwest Corporation promised a $168,000 commission for delivering my 8 acres vacant and ready for development. She'd been spending money she didn't have, banking on stealing my land through fraud and intimidation. Now she was trapped between criminal prosecution and personal ruin. That night, I hired an independent hydrologist to test my actual water usage. Cost me $400 I couldn't spare, but the results were devastating to Linda's case. My consumption was 40% below agricultural averages. The county data was complete fiction. I also upgraded my security system with heat-sensitive cameras and motion detectors. If Linda wanted to escalate to arson or sabotage, I'd capture every criminal act in admissible detail. But the real revelation came when Walter brought me a recording he'd made at Linda's house. "Stayed after yesterday's committee meeting," he explained, his voice shaking. "Hid in her garage when everyone left." The audio was scratchy, but Linda's voice cut through clear as a death sentence. "Jim, I guarantee vacant possession by October 1st. The agricultural situation is temporary. Farmers always cave under enough pressure. I've orchestrated this before." A gravelly male voice responded, "Linda, if this timeline slips, we're talking $50,000 in penalty clauses. Plus you forfeit the commission. Can you absolutely deliver?" "Trust me. I've got county officials building harassment cases, neighbors documenting fake violations, and if necessary." Her voice dropped to a whisper that made my skin crawl. "Well, farm accidents happen all the time." The recording ended, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Walter's face had gone pale as winter wheat. "David, she's talking about hurting you." I felt that familiar combat alertness flooding my system, the hyper-awareness that kept soldiers alive when death was hunting them. "Walter, you just handed me evidence of criminal conspiracy and implied violence. This isn't harassment anymore. It's organized crime." Here's where 20 years of military strategy kicked in. When your enemy reveals their true objective, you don't just defend, you destroy their operational foundation. That night, I researched agricultural easements until my eyes burned from screen glare. Discovered that farmers can file conservation easements that legally protect land from development. Forever. The process takes 30 days, but once approved, the property becomes untouchable. Even better, the state pays substantial tax benefits to encourage agricultural preservation. Linda's development dream could become legally impossible with the right paperwork. Dawn found me at the county courthouse with a stack of forms and a $500 filing fee. By noon, my 8 acres were officially protected under Ohio's Agricultural Land Preservation Program. Forever. The beauty of it? Even if Linda somehow forced me to sell, no developer could touch the land. Her $2.8 million deal had just become worthless paper. But I kept this information locked down tight. Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't see coming. Let Linda keep escalating. Keep committing crimes. Keep building evidence of her own conspiracy. Because when this war reached its climax, and Walter's recording guaranteed it would, I wanted her buried so deep she'd never threaten another farmer. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting in my kitchen with the only people I trusted completely. Rachel sat with her laptop open, legal research tabs filling the screen. Over the past month, she transformed from worried wife into full-time legal investigator. "I've been digging into agricultural protection laws all night. David, what you filed yesterday was brilliant. But we need to go bigger." Nathan Cooper, my agricultural lawyer and old army buddy, leaned back in his chair with that calculating look I remembered from Afghanistan. "Manufacturing evidence for civil cases is federal fraud. David, if we can prove conspiracy, this becomes a RICO case." That's when I knew we had them. See, back in the 80s, Congress passed the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act specifically to target organized crime. Most people think RICO only applies to mob bosses, but it covers any pattern of coordinated illegal activity for financial gain. Linda's harassment campaign, her hired committee, her paid investigator, that was textbook racketeering. By Wednesday, we had our coordinated attack plan ready. Deputy Sheriff Martinez would file criminal complaints with the State Attorney General's office. Nathan would initiate civil proceedings for damages and injunctive relief. Rachel would submit regulatory complaints to the Real Estate Licensing Board, Water Management Department, and Agricultural Protection Agency. "What about evidence collection?" Walter asked. "Keep doing what you're doing," I told him. "But from now on, everything gets documented. I've got enough cameras around this property to film a Hollywood movie." The sweet smell of evening corn pollen drifted through the kitchen window as we finalized our strategy. It reminded me why this fight mattered, not just for my family's financial future, but for every farmer facing harassment from developers who saw agricultural land as nothing more than potential profit. Nathan stood to leave, stuffing papers into his battered briefcase. David, within 48 hours, Linda Morrison is going to discover that her little real estate scheme just became the worst decision of her life. What's our timeline? Rachel asked. Fast. Her development contract expires October 1st, which gives us 6 weeks to completely destroy her conspiracy. Nathan's predatory smile returned. By the time we're finished, she'll be lucky if she can get a job selling magazine subscriptions. Linda's desperation reached a whole new level when she realized time was running out. Saturday morning, I walked out to start my combine harvester and immediately smelled something wrong. The sickly sweet scent of contaminated fuel. Someone had dumped about 5 pounds of sugar into my gas tank overnight. Thanks to my upgraded security system, I had crystal clear footage of Linda creeping around my equipment shed at 3 a.m. with a bag of granulated sugar and a funnel. Sunday afternoon brought the hydraulic line sabotage, cut just enough to cause slow leaks that would fail catastrophically under pressure. A farmer working alone could get seriously injured if hydraulic equipment failed unexpectedly. Tuesday brought the wheel bolt sabotage. Someone had loosened the lug nuts on my farm trailer just enough to create dangerous wobbling at highway speeds. If I'd been hauling corn to market and those wheels came off on Route 33, I could have killed someone. Each incident was documented in high-definition detail by my surveillance network. Linda's face, her license plate, even audio of her muttering complaints about stubborn farmers, while she committed felonies on my property. But the real escalation came Thursday, when I caught her trying to steal my irrigation pump motor. The diesel engine that powered my water system was worth about $3,000. More importantly, losing it during drought season would kill my entire crop within days. I'd been expecting this move, thanks to Walter's intelligence network. So when my motion sensors detected movement near the pump house at 2 a.m., I was ready. I slipped out the back door and crept through my cornfield using techniques I'd learned during night patrols in Afghanistan. The rustling corn stalks covered any sound of my approach, and the new moon meant visibility was nearly zero. Linda was there with a truck and trailer, attempting to disconnect my pump motor with the help of some guy I didn't recognize, probably her hired muscle. They'd brought bolt cutters and a come-along winch, clearly planning to steal the entire assembly. I pulled out my phone and started recording, capturing clear audio of their conversation. "Just cut the mounting bolts," Linda whispered. "Once his irrigation fails, he'll have to sell within a week. What if he has insurance? Equipment theft isn't covered under agricultural policies unless it's specifically listed. This pump wasn't valuable enough to itemize. Wrong on both counts, lady." I called Martinez. "Sheriff's Department, this is Deputy Martinez." "Mike, it's David. Got 2 people actively stealing equipment from my property right now. I'm recording everything. Stay back, David. We'll be there in 5 minutes." The sound of approaching sirens sent Linda and her accomplice scrambling. They abandoned their tools and fled in the truck, but not before my cameras captured the license plate and both faces clearly. Martinez arrived with backup and collected the evidence. Bolt cutters with Linda's fingerprints. The winch system they'd abandoned. Tire tracks matching her vehicle. More importantly, my video footage showed premeditated theft of agricultural equipment, a felony in Ohio carrying up to 5 years in prison. But Linda's biggest mistake was involving a hired accomplice. The guy turned out to be Rick Paulson, her private investigator, who had priors for fraud and definitely wasn't licensed for equipment recovery operations. "David, this just became a federal case," Martinez explained while processing the scene. "Conspiracy to commit theft, organized fraud, maybe even RICO violations." Friday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Walter shuffled over with intelligence that made everything click into place. "Linda's completely panicked," he whispered. "Overheard her screaming at someone on the phone about the development deadline. Apparently, if she doesn't deliver your land by October 1st, she owes the developers $50,000 in penalties." "How long until October 1st? Walter checked his calendar. 18 days. 18 days until Linda faced financial ruin. 18 days of a cornered predator with nothing left to lose. She's lost it completely, David, Walter continued, gripping the fence rail. Overheard her talking to that Paulson character about creating an accidental fire that would force immediate land sale. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. Fire? During drought season. Gets worse. She's been researching volunteer fire department response times, wind patterns, everything. Plans to set it during next week's training exercise when most crews are occupied. I felt that familiar combat alertness flooding my system. The hyper-awareness that meant life-or-death decisions were coming fast. Linda had escalated from harassment to vandalism to theft, and now she was planning arson. In drought conditions, a cornfield fire could spread to neighboring properties, maybe even threaten lives. When? Thursday night. She mentioned something about making it look like faulty electrical equipment and having an alibi at the city council meeting. That gave me 48 hours to prepare for what could be the final battle of this war. Wednesday morning, I drove to hardware stores in 3 different counties, paying cash for fire suppression equipment, portable pumps, emergency water tanks, flame-retardant chemicals, everything I'd need to fight a fire until professional help arrived. But my real preparation involved Fire Chief Linda Morrison, another Army veteran who understood the difference between legitimate emergencies and criminal acts. Danny, hypothetically, if someone was planning to commit arson on my property, what kind of evidence would you need for criminal charges? His weathered face went grim. Video footage of the fire being set. Accelerant residue. Premeditation evidence. Why, David? You expecting trouble? Let's just say I want to be prepared. That afternoon, I installed heat-sensitive cameras throughout my cornfield, military-grade thermal imaging that would detect unusual heat signatures long before flames became visible. The cameras linked directly to both my phone and the fire department's emergency dispatch system. I also coordinated with Martinez to have patrol units standing by in the area Thursday evening. Not close enough to spook Linda, but ready for immediate response when the inevitable happened. Walter provided final intelligence Wednesday night. She bought accelerant this afternoon. 3 gallons of camping fuel from the outdoor store on Highway 33. Paid cash, wore sunglasses and a baseball cap. But I followed her. Did anyone else see this purchase? Store security cameras. I made sure to browse near the register when she checked out. Thursday evening arrived with oppressive humidity and dead calm air. Perfect conditions for controlled burning. Terrible conditions for stopping a wildfire once it started. I positioned myself in my grandfather's old hunting blind overlooking the back 40, armed with night vision binoculars and a direct radio link to dispatch. Every thermal camera was active. Every heat sensor calibrated. If Linda wanted to play with fire, I'd document every spark. At 11:47 p.m., my thermal cameras detected movement along the eastern property line. 2 heat signatures, one carrying what looked like containers, moving systematically through my corn rows. Linda and Paulson, right on schedule. I watched through infrared as they poured accelerant along a 100-foot section of corn, creating a fire break design to contain the blaze initially before letting it spread, accidentally. Their conversation carried clearly in the still night air. Remember, we were never here, Linda whispered. This needs to look like equipment malfunction. What about insurance investigations? By the time investigators arrive, David will be so desperate to sell that he'll accept any offer. Farmers always cave when they lose a crop. They were committing felony arson while discussing real estate fraud, documenting their own criminal conspiracy in admissible detail. At 11:52 p.m., Linda flicked her lighter. The corn ignited instantly, accelerant-fueled flames racing along the pre-soaked line like liquid fire. Within seconds, the blaze was visible from space. Orange light dancing against the night sky like some hellish celebration. That's when my thermal cameras triggered automatic alerts to fire dispatch, sheriff's department, and my personal phone simultaneously. I'd programmed the system to send GPS coordinates, live video feeds, and emergency response codes the moment unusual heat was detected. Fire trucks were rolling within 90 seconds. Record response time that caught Linda completely off guard. I watched her panic as sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer by the second. She and Paulson tried to flee, but their escape route led directly past responding emergency vehicles. The expression on Linda's face when Fire Chief Morrison stepped out of the lead truck, illuminated by flames she'd set, was pure terror mixed with the dawning realization that she'd been caught red-handed committing arson. "Ma'am, step away from the fire line. You're under arrest." The crackling flames provided a fitting soundtrack to the end of Linda Morrison's criminal career. Game over. The irony was perfect. Linda's arson happened on the same night as the monthly city council meeting, where half the town was gathered to discuss the proposed agricultural protection ordinance. She'd planned to use the meeting as her alibi, never imagining it would become the venue for her very public downfall. I was sitting in the back row of the packed council chambers when Fire Chief Morrison's radio crackled to life at 11:54 p.m. Code red. Agricultural fire on Brennan property. Multiple units responding. Possible arson in progress. The room erupted. 30 people started talking at once. Council members demanding updates. Residents asking if their properties were threatened. Mayor Williams called for order, but you could smell the panic in the air like smoke. That's when Linda Morrison made her fatal mistake. She was sitting 3 rows ahead of me, and when Morrison's radio announced the fire, she turned around with this satisfied little smile, like she was enjoying a private joke. For just a moment, her mask slipped completely, revealing the predator underneath. But her expression changed real quick when Morrison got his second radio update. "Chief, we've got the arsonists in custody. 2 suspects arrested at scene with accelerant containers. Fire contained to planned burn area." The blood drained from Linda's face like someone had pulled a plug. She started gathering her purse, clearly planning to slip out before anyone connected her to the emergency. Too late. "Mrs. Morrison?" Chief Morrison called out, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "Mind staying put for a few minutes? Deputies are en route with some questions." You could have heard a pin drop. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward Linda, who'd gone white as paper and started stammering about needing to check on her house. That's when I stood up and dropped the nuclear bomb that ended her criminal career forever. "Mr. Mayor, if I may address the council?" My voice was steady, controlled, carrying the authority of someone who'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. "I have evidence relevant to tonight's arson that the community needs to hear." Mayor Williams nodded, recognizing me from years of town meetings. "The floor recognizes David Brennan." I pulled out the folder containing months of documented evidence. Walter's recordings, surveillance footage, financial records proving Linda's development conspiracy. The rustling papers sounded unnaturally loud in the dead-silent chamber. "Ladies and gentlemen, what happened tonight wasn't random arson. It was the culmination of a 3-month criminal conspiracy designed to force me off my family's land for development profit." Linda tried to interrupt, but Mayor Williams silenced her with a look that could freeze lava. I played Walter's recording first, Linda's voice discussing the $2.8 million development deal, her borrowed commission money, her timeline pressures. Gasps echoed through the chamber as people realized they were hearing evidence of organized real estate fraud. "But here's the beautiful part," I continued, feeling the moment building like thunder before lightning. 3 weeks ago, I filed an agricultural conservation easement on my property. That land is now legally protected from development. Forever. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Walter stood up from his seat near the front. "I've been Linda's inside source for months," he announced, his voice shaking but determined. "Everything David just said is true. She hired criminals to harass him, bribed neighbors for false testimony, and tonight she tried to burn down his crops to force a land sale." That's when Deputy Martinez walked through the chamber doors with backup officers, still smelling like smoke and looking grim as death. "Linda Morrison, you're under arrest for felony arson, conspiracy to commit fraud, criminal harassment, and about 6 other charges we're still sorting through." He pulled out handcuffs while the entire town watched. "You have the right to remain silent, though honestly, you've already said plenty on tape." The room exploded into chaos. Council members demanding explanations. Residents asking how they'd missed a criminal conspiracy happening in their neighborhood. But the real mic drop moment came when Nathan Cooper stepped forward with a folder thick as a phone book. For the record, Mrs. Morrison, you're also facing federal RICO charges, civil damages in excess of $500,000, and permanent disbarment from real estate practice in Ohio. His predatory lawyer smile was beautiful to behold. Your development deal is void. Your commission is forfeited. And your assets are frozen pending investigation. Linda's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair like a deflated balloon, the reality of her situation finally hitting home. No development deal. No commission. No future. Just criminal charges and financial ruin. As Martinez led her out in handcuffs, she passed right by my seat. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something I'd never expected. Genuine fear mixed with the dawning realization that she'd destroyed her own life for money she'd never see. Should have stuck to selling houses, Linda, I said quietly as she passed. The last thing I heard before the chamber doors closed was her sobbing. Justice served, with the whole town as witnesses. 6 months later, I'm standing in my cornfield watching Olivia and Sophia help with spring planting, and the transformation still takes my breath away. Not just the land, but everything this fight changed about who we are as a family. The legal carnage was beautiful to watch. Linda pleaded guilty to felony arson, conspiracy, and real estate fraud. 2 years in prison, $50,000 in restitution, and a criminal record that'll follow her forever. Her private investigator, Rick Paulson, got 18 months and lost his license permanently. Midwest Development Corporation paid $75,000 to avoid federal prosecution, basically admitting they orchestrated the whole harassment campaign. But the real victory wasn't money. It was watching my daughters' faces when I told them college was fully funded. Insurance payouts plus lawsuit settlements meant Olivia could pursue veterinary school and Sophia could study engineering without a penny of debt. Sometimes justice comes with compound interest. The sweet scent of fresh soil fills the morning air as I watch Sophia operating my grandfather's 1960 John Deere, learning techniques that built this land through 3 generations. Last week, she announced she's double majoring in agricultural engineering. Someone needs to help family farmers fight these corporate bullies. Dad. Rachel finished paralegal certification in January and now works with Nathan Cooper, specializing in agricultural defense cases. Our battle inspired something bigger. She's helped 12 farming families defeat similar harassment campaigns statewide. Knowledge is power, she says, but applied knowledge is revolution. Walter became our unlikely hero after testifying against Linda's conspiracy. He volunteers with the County Extension Office now, teaching seniors about agricultural heritage and fraud recognition. 40 years of postal service taught me patterns. He grins. Turns out predators always make the same mistakes. The community transformation has been incredible. Our case triggered the Brennan Agricultural Protection Act, state legislation making farmer harassment a felony that's already being copied nationwide. Property rights advocates use our story as a blueprint for fighting development corruption. But I'm proudest of the Family Farm Defense Fund scholarship we established with settlement money. Every year, we provide full college tuition for students studying agricultural law, environmental protection, or sustainable farming. This year's recipients include a ranch daughter fighting mining companies and an organic farmer who survived suburban encroachment. Walking through corn rows now, listening to new growth rustling and my daughters laughing as they work, I realize something profound. This story was never about Linda Morrison. It was about ordinary people refusing to let money-hungry bullies destroy something beautiful for profit. The rough bark of my grandfather's oak tree feels eternal under my palm as evening light paints golden across fields that will never be subdivisions, never be strip malls, never be anything but what they've always been. Good land, growing food, for families who understand what really matters. Share your own HOA nightmare story in the comments. Let's expose these suburban tyrants together and help more families fight back against development corruption. If this story gave you chills, if it made you believe that justice still exists when good people stand together, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell for more tales about ordinary people beating corrupt systems. Because when communities unite against bullies, Even the greediest predators learn to respect the power of organized resistance. Next week, how a retired teacher used a 200-year-old property deed to shut down a luxury resort stealing her lake access, and why the developers are still paying her rent. That's all for today's story. If watching justice serve itself made your day, drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in David's situation. And remember, document everything. Build community. Truth wins. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.